Up next, Nick Tate from Space 1999. Well, hey everyone, and welcome back to another Initiative Modeler. Wonderfest 2023 wrapped up on Sunday, and I do plan on having my Wonderfest video posted towards the end of this week. I'm still in the process of putting that together, but I wanted to publish this one separately because I had the opportunity to interview Nick Tate from Space 1999. If you recall, I mentioned he was going to be at the show, and in fact, that's why I had this comm lock built, if you remember, and I was able to have him autograph it. He was able to autograph it at a gathering on Saturday night. You can see I'm sitting here next to him, and here he is autographing the Comlock, so this is my evidence that he actually did it. So a big thank you to both Gordon Moriguchi and Todd Morton from Space 1999 Props and Chips. Those are the two guys who sponsored Nick's visit. And prior to the show, I reached out to Gordon to see if it might be possible to sit down with Nick to do a short interview. So I forwarded him some questions, and at the show, Gordon confirmed that I'd be able to sit down with Nick the next day. And so that's where the interview took place. You can see this is a room now that is across from the main vendor room. You can see Rick Sternbach, John Eves, and at the end was Nick's table. And they arranged to have this beautiful display of eagles. You can see here are the eagles of all different scales, and you'll be able to learn more about these in my Wonderfest video because I did a short interview with those guys. And so prior to getting the day started, I got to sit down with Nick and do this interview. So I hope you enjoy it. It was a lot of fun to do. So I have a YouTube channel, and many of my subscribers are fans of yours and big on Space 1999, so I thought it would be great if you could say a quick hello to them and ask you a couple questions. Would that be okay?
Okay, where do we say hello?
We're going to stay right there.
Oh my God, is it?
So you ready? Are you ready, Ken? Okay, all right. So, hey everybody, I have the distinct pleasure of having Nick Tate, who of course many of you know played Alan Carter on Space 1999 amongst many other roles in his career, and he's agreed to spend just a few minutes with me to say hello to you guys. So thank you for being on, Nick.
Oh, it's all my pleasure.
Yeah, thank you very much. So here we are, almost 50 years later, and people are still talking about Space 1999.
It's hard to believe.
Yeah.
1973?
Yeah.
I was just telling the story here about how I met the Andersons. I was going to, they said the show's all cast, sorry we didn't meet you sooner. Sylvia had worked with my dad. My dad was in all the television series with the puppets,
the Thunderbirds,
yeah. And Dad played all the extraneous characters.
Oh, he did?
He wasn't one of the leads, but he was there all the time because he could do so many funny voices. Over here, what do you mean over here? Shoot him, kill him, get out of town, all these different voices he was doing. All that. I take after my father. I do a lot of silly voices. So Dad knew Sylvia very well.
Yeah.
And when she met me, she said, "You're Johnny Tate's son. Oh, what a shame. We should have met you before we cast all the show,
Yeah.
Anyway, as I just was telling the story, they were going to kill the character that I was going to play.
Yeah.
And when they decided to use me and bring me into the show, they said, let's not kill him. In fact, I got even luckier than that. The Italian actor that was going to play Alphonse Catani, chief Eagle pilot, who was Italian, they decided not to give him the role.
Wow.
And they gave it to me.
Yeah.
And changed the name to Alan Carter.
Yeah.
So I got lucky.
Wow, that's great. Alan is one of my favorite characters, and he had some great characteristics to him. He was a strong character, competent. You could always rely on him. He's loyal. So I'm curious, when you develop a character like that, is that something that the writers had in mind? Did you just infuse a lot of this? Do you have input in how that developed?
Well, there was a particular style of character that they wanted. As I said, there was going to be a character called Alphonse Catani, Italian. He had to be irreverent. He had to be not insolent, but he had to be kind of like speak his own mind all the time.
Yeah.
And they asked me could I do an Italian accent because they were trying to replace the Italian actor with an English actor who was working and had the paperwork to stay in London. And the only Italian characters I could do was sort of like greengrocers and restaurant Italian voices I would do, and that's why you hear how bad I am at Italian. I cannot do it. And so the Andersons went, "Oh no, stop it! No, that's no good."
Right.
I said, "I haven't lost my other role." They said, "No." And then Lee Katzin said to them, "Why don't we let him play it Australian?" And they went, "No, there's no Australians in the moon." And I said, "There's no English in the moon either." And he went, "See, look, that's the guy. That's him."
Yeah.
I want that kind of reaction, and I got the role.
Wow, that's fantastic.
All due to Lee Katzin, the director. Yeah.
So, as I said, we're here 50 years later still talking about Space 99. What do you think makes the show so special?
Her first time here was when I was...
I don't know. I think that, I believe that we had humanity in that show. It wasn't. It was more science fiction than it was science fiction.
Yeah.
And so in the beginning, particularly in the first series, we didn't have sort of end of Brighton Pool monsters with silly hats on and stuff.
Right.
Which Fred Freiberger put into the show.
Yeah.
He was the second producer of the second series, and I think that demeaned the show, quite frankly.
Yeah.
And he talked to me about how when he said he was taking over the show, he said, "I want to inject humanity," and I said, "You want to inject humanity? Don't you think we have enough humanity in the show?"
Yeah.
And he said, "No, I don't. You'll see what I mean." Well, I never did see what he meant.
Yeah. I find that to be the case too, because as a kid, I really enjoyed the second season, because all the monsters and stuff. But, as I watched the show later as an adult, I really grew a great appreciation for the first season, what you guys were trying to do with it.
Well, you talked earlier on, you asked me, did I have any input into my character? I had a huge amount of input because the writers had only prepared it for an Italian actor.
Yeah.
So when I came along, suddenly they were in turmoil. What are we going to do? We don't know any Australians.
Yeah.
Can you help us?
Yeah.
So I went to Johnny Byrne's house over the weekend when the first week that I was working on the show with them, and several of the writers came along at the time, and they talked to me about Australia, and we formed the character.
Yeah.
Talked about me being in the Australian Air Force. Alan Carter's character.
Yeah.
And I gave them a lot of kind of lingo that he might use as an Australian. And
is there a lot of Nick Tate in Alan Carter?
Well, yeah, they based the whole thing around me.
Yeah, that's great.
All the irreverence and the silly jokes that I make all the time.
Very good.
I drive my wife crazy, but I know that the people that watched Space 1999 like my sense of humor.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you very much for spending a few minutes with me. You were an inspiration to me as well. I really do appreciate it. And I want a big thank you for coming out to the convention, because many of us fans really enjoy being able to this opportunity to meet you.
Well,
so thank you very much.
Thank you, but it's a two-way street. I swear to God, when you're doing film or television, you don't get any feedback.
Yeah.
So 50 years later, after I finish the series, I come here and I'm getting all this wonderful empathy and feedback. It makes me want to cry sometimes, because I have people standing here hugging me and there's tears rolling down their face saying, "I loved your character, and you don't know what you did for me." And I'm going, "Hell, you're doing it for me right now,
Well, we really do love you. Thank you so much. Appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Kiss him.
All right, there you have it. Nick Tate. Thank you. Well, it certainly was a pleasure talking with Nick Tate, and he is someone who is very appreciative of the fans. He really did love making the show, and as you can tell, he wished that it had continued on in the direction that Season 1 was taking. I have read this book called Destination Moonbase Alpha. It's written by an author named Robert Wood, and in that book, he points out that the writers really did have a particular direction they were taking the show, and it went on to further say that the writers had intended to imply that there was some sort of force that was guiding the Alphans along the journey. Now, all of this narrative, of course, was abandoned with Season 2, and we all know it took on a different direction. Another thing I wanted to point out, by the way, is that I know that Nick Tate also guest starred on an episode called Final Mission, Star Trek The Next Generation, and I actually did want to ask him about that experience, but I didn't want to take too long with the interview as there were people waiting to meet him. So just in case you're wondering, I did have that in mind. Okay, well, coming up next then, at least the next video for the channel will be my Wonderfest video, and that will consist of several other interviews that I did. I hope you'll enjoy, and also a look at the model show. Bear in mind there were over 1,040 entries in this show. There was no way for me to photograph every single one of them, but what I did was I went along the show. In fact, what I do is on the first day I go through the show, kind of taking it all in, because it is quite amazing, and so it's overwhelming when you see all the work that's there. And then the second day I go through it a couple other times before I photograph. So what you'll see is really just highlights from the model show, and ones that I just picked out that I thought were interesting. Not that they all weren't interesting, but I just had to choose. Well, I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you have any questions, feel free to contact me here on my YouTube channel or at illustratedmodeler@gmail.com. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Take care.